Hello, I'm Adrian, and in this video I'm going to be talking about and giving you a few sounds from my Fender Super Champ. So I think one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, what is that little amp that sits behind you in your videos? And I'm going to try and tell you a little bit more about it in this video. This is the amp that I've used in just about all of my videos, at least up until about 6 months ago when I moved into this studio. Now I'm lucky enough to have a little bit more space, and I've got a few of my bigger amps in here to choose from as well. But most of the time it's actually hard to go wrong with this little thing here, and you've got to remember that for big exciting guitar sounds you don't necessarily need a huge high wattage amp, and there are in fact many famous examples of great classic guitar tones coming from very small low wattage amps like this one. So this is a Fender Super Champ from 1983, designed by a man called Paul Revere, who's something of an amp design legend. And I think Fender have used the name Champ or Super Champ on a number of their amps over the years. And this amp certainly isn't to be confused with the currently produced Super Champ amp, which I think is quite a different beast. It seems to be some kind of digital modelling amp. I've not actually played through it, but it's very different from this amp here, which is an all-valve amp and all hand-wired as well. And I think I'm right in saying that it's one of the last amps that Fender made that were hand-wired. And I don't remember exactly how much I paid for it, but I remember it being quite a good price, so it was probably around £500 or £600. And just looking on eBay just now and on reverb.com, they seem to be going these days for £1,000 plus. That is, if you can find a good one. They're certainly becoming rarer and more sought after, and they're appreciating in value. I remember going to pick this amp up, and I didn't have a car at the time, so I had to get on the train to somewhere just north of London. Met the guy who was selling it in the station car park, handed over the cash, and the amp actually came with this nice flight case. And I remember it being quite a struggle to get the amp home. I had to get it on the train and then on the tube, and there are a couple of different changes on the tube and up and down stairs and escalators. But it was worth the hassle, because this has definitely become one of my most loved and most used amps. I think in many ways this is the perfect amp for me. It's a very practical amp, and it's certainly a very versatile amp. I think, as I've demonstrated in many of my videos, I've used it for all kinds of styles, all kinds of different types of music, from post-punk to jazz to country, and it's always delivered in all of those different musical situations. For recording, I think it's the perfect amp just because you can get some great sounds at neighbour-friendly volumes, but it's also capable of going pretty loud in a rehearsal situation. It can certainly go loud enough to make itself heard above drums and above a noisy band. And I've also used it for many gigs as well. On most gigs you're going to just put a microphone in front of it and have it running through the PA system anyway, so you don't need tons of volume on stage, and if you do need to hear yourself a bit more clearly on stage, you can always just have it running through the monitors as well. When I bought the amp, it was in good condition, and although I've used it a lot, I've looked after it, so it's still in pretty good nick. There have been a few changes made to it, I think. The speaker in this amp is a Celestion 10-inch speaker, or vintage 10-inch speaker, and I think one of the previous owners must have put that in, because I don't think that's the original speaker that came with these amps. And in fact, I think it's the done thing with Super Champs to change the speaker in it. I think most people tend to do that and swap the original speaker for something that's a bit more exciting sounding. I've had it serviced a few times over the years, and one other change that has been made is the reverb tank has been swapped. I remember the reverb stopped working at some point a few years ago, and I needed to have that fixed. So one unique thing about this amp is that it uses the rare and unusual valve, a 6C10 valve. And I don't think there are many guitar amps that use this particular valve, and they're no longer made by anybody, and they're becoming increasingly sought after. So in a sense, it's a little bit of a liability when you get one of these amps, that you're dependent on the diminishing stocks of this particularly exotic valve. I actually took this amp to get it repaired earlier this year by amp guru Mike Hill up in Milton Keynes, and one of the things that he discovered was that the 6C10 valve was past its best and needed replacing, and he was actually pretty dubious about sourcing any more 6C10 valves, just because although there are still some to be found, you can never be sure about the quality of these valves. And he in fact offered to do a mod where you replace the 6C10 with a couple of other valves, I can't remember exactly what, so that you're no longer reliant on this 6C10. But I decided against that in the end, just because I wanted to keep the amp all original, and went out and got a couple of 6C10 valves, and they're not cheap either. It cost kind of 50 quid a piece, so I bought one and put it in the amp, and then I got another one just so I've got a spare, just in case they become impossible to find over the coming years. It's actually fairly simple to get really good sounds from this amp, and my usual starting point is just to run the amp completely clean, and got very simple controls on this amp. We've just got 6 knobs here. We've got volume, treble and bass, then there's a reverb level, lead level, which I'll come to in just a minute, and then we've got a master volume as well. So starting here, I've just got a basic clean sound, and see, nothing spectacular about that. It's just a really nice Fendery clean sound, and it's a good starting point for most things, I find. I'll adjust the treble and the bass to taste depending on what guitar I'm using. With the Jazzmaster, sometimes I might have a bit more treble, a bit less treble, possibly with the Telecaster, and I usually find that that's a pretty good starting point. Now, for overdrive, I'll do one of two things. You can actually get some quite nice overdrive sounds just from the amp itself using the master volume, so I could just try cranking up the volume control here and then just keeping it at a reasonable overall volume with the master, and then you can get some quite nice crunchy rhythm guitar sounds. Then also what you've got on this amp is a lead channel. I'm not sure if, strictly speaking, this is a true 2-channel guitar amplifier. I'm not really sort of clued up with the technicalities of this, but I've been told, or I've read, that it's not really a 2-channel guitar amp. But you have got this pull volume pot here, which will give you some lead guitar tones. And I've read that a lot of people aren't fans of the Super Champ lead guitar sound. It's quite fuzzy. It doesn't have loads of clarity, but I actually quite like it. I think it's got a real character to it. Not right for every situation by any means, but I think it's got an interesting kind of sound. So let me just demo that sound for you here. I'm just going to pull out the volume control here, and then the lead level comes into play, and you can just kind of adjust that to taste, and that gives you kind of sludgy distortion sound there when you've got it on the neck pickup, and then you can get a bit more bite if you want to as well on the bridge pickups. So one of the areas where this amp really shines is when you start using pedals with it, and that's something I very frequently do. I'll just run this amp fairly clean, and then I'll use pedals to get all of my other sounds. And I believe these days you hear people talking about amps being good pedal platforms, and I certainly think this amp fits the bill as far as being a good pedal platform goes. So let me just demo a couple of sounds now. I've just got the basic clean sound back again now. That's just this. And then on my pedal board, I'll usually have a few different types of drives. So I'll usually have a natural sounding overdrive pedal of one kind or another, maybe a tube screamer or a Klon Centaur type pedal, and that will give you these nice kind of classic overdrive sounds. And then if I want some more extreme kind of drive, I'll have some kind of rat type distortion pedal, a kind of fuzzy distortion for some more extreme kind of sounds, so something like this. And then very often I have some kind of fuzz pedal as well. So here I've just got my JHS mini foot fuzz, and that gives you some nice kind of classic 60s fuzz sounds. So with 2 or 3 nice overdrive distortion or fuzz pedals, you've got all kinds of different sounds covered there. A couple of interesting Super Champ facts that I just found out. Apparently the Super Champ was the amp used on the Posies classic album Frosting on the Beta, which is one of my favourite power pop type albums. Some amazing guitar sounds on that album. Another good Super Champ fact, I found this out just now. I didn't realise that it's one of Robert Quine's favourite amps. And that just makes me love it even more, I think, because I'm a big Quine fan. And I've got a quote here from Quine, and he says that the greatest amp I've ever owned, a little Fender Super Champ with the stock Fender speaker, not the electro voice. So Quine obviously didn't believe in swapping out the original speaker for anything else. He just used it as is. And that's about all I've got to say about my Fender Super Champ. I will leave you with some sounds.